Hi, my name is Lucas Beal. I'm with Sloan Implement Company in Assumption, Illinois. And today we're going to go over some items to check for grain quality, specifically for food corn and popcorn. We're going to start with the corn head because obviously the header is the first thing to engage the crop, so that's where we want to start. That's where we want to start our presentation. A lot of times in grain quality situations or complaints that we get, a lot of times most of the damage it comes from the header. A lot of guys, do a really good job of getting their combine set and adjusted, but they overlook the header. It's just a given or taken for granted that the header doesn't really do a lot of damage. However, if it's incorrectly set, it can also do a lot of damage. So the first thing we want to talk about is our deck plates. Our deck plates, you want to adjust those to where the gap, when it's all the way closed, is just barely slightly larger or basically about the same size as your average stalk. Okay. In a grain quality situation, you want to make sure that they're about as tight as they can get and still get the stalk through it. The reason for that is if the deck plates are a little bit too wide, what can happen is the butt end of that ear can come down, and if it's a little bit open, it'll kind of get down in between the deck plates, and it can actually crack some grain right there. So you want to make sure your deck plates are just slightly larger at the fully closed position, and just barely larger, or right at the same size as your average stalk on your corn. Another area of concern is the auger. Most augers never get adjusted on corn heads, and in most cases it really doesn't matter. But in a quality situation, it does matter. We've seen a lot of damage occur if the auger is set in the far down position like this one is. That's where they're shipped from the factory, because the corn head comes in it's stood up on the trailer. And they want that auger down and back so it doesn't bounce on that truck. So they're shipped in the down and back position. And most of them are never adjusted. And in a field corn situation, they probably are going to work okay. However, in a grain quality situation, you're going to want to get that auger up as much as you can. And the reason for that is if the auger is down, what it can do is it can actually slice an ear of corn, and wherever it slices it, it pretty much destroys those kernels in that direct vicinity. So you want to get that auger up so that you can easily get a full ear underneath of that auger. And the worst thing that you can do is have that auger just barely below the width of an ear. And because what will happen is that flighting will come along and it will actually just rake the tops or just knock the tops off of kernels as it tries to move that ear to the center. So you want to get that auger up to where it's easily can get an ear underneath of the bottom of the flighting, and that way, if it pushes an ear here, there's grain below it, it can disperse. So it's much more gentle on that ear of corn at that time. So again, we go back. We want to make sure our deck plates are nice and snug around that stalk in the fully closed position. And we want to make sure that auger is up plenty above the width of an average ear, or the biggest ear that you can find. That way the flighting doesn't rake the top of the ear, or it doesn't slice that ear in two and get pinched underneath that flighting, and a lot of damage that can occur there. Also, if you can, you do want to take in a little bit of trash, more so probably than what you would in a normal field corn situation. So you want to try to run your head a little bit slower than normal, or as slow as you can. Again, the faster you run that head, the more force and violence it hits those deck plates to snap that ear. So the slower you can run that corn head, it does two things. You take in a little bit more trash, which kind of cushions that material in the combine, as well as it will not be as violent when it hits the deck plates, and the auger is going to be running slower and all those kinds of things. So that's going to wrap up the corn head portion. But again, a couple things that can make a big difference. And again, we're talking small gains. A little gain here, plus a little gain here, plus a little gain here, adds up to a big gain when it comes to grain quality. Alright, now we're going to move on to the combine portion of the grain quality talk. And first place, again, we want to start is at the front of the machine. We want to make sure our drum is in the up position, and there's handles on the side of the feeder house here. On both sides, there's one on each side. You pull out on the pin and you'll flip the lever to where it's pointing up. That would be the up position. If they're pointing straight back, if I was to pull this and push it back this way, that's going to be the down position, and that's not where we want that for corn. For soybeans or wheat or something like that, down position's fine. But for corn, especially in a quality situation, we want to make sure that that drum is up. Now, number one, we've got nice big ears coming underneath that drum, but if it's in the down position, that drum is going to be moving a lot more. And when it goes up, when the corn comes underneath it and slams back down, because basically it's just gravity that's pulling it back down, the corn lifts it up, gravity brings it back down. That slamming and banging in there can damage kernels as well. We talked in the corn head portion about making sure, try to run your head as slow as you can. That you want to make sure that your reverser is adjusted correctly. Again, your sheave gap in here should be 1/8 of an inch fully slowed down. That's going to get your proper belt tension. You're also going to want to make sure and get your greasing done. You know, your 12-2 grease zerk points, because if this is slipping, you're not going to maintain corn head speed. You're not going to maintain your nice job that the corn head's doing, your residue management, things of that nature. So make sure that your reverser's been serviced and in good shape, as well as making sure that your belt is properly tensioned with the sheave gap. So that's going to wrap up the feeder house portion on the left-hand side. Okay, we've covered the portion on the smaller S-Series combines, but on the bigger combines, the 680 and 690, we don't have the variable speed belt like we had before. We have a fixed speed drive with the 5-speed power shift that we can change our speeds. So again, you want to try to run your corn head as slow as you can. So you're going to want to be in gear 1, which anytime you start the combine, that's where it's going to start. Anytime you throw the separator in gear, you know, after a shutdown, that it's going to be back to first gear. So that's probably where you're going to want to start. Again, you want a little bit of trash to try to help cushion some of that grain, and you don't want to run your corn head overly fast, because the harder it slams that ear down against those deck plates and the faster that auger runs, the more potential there is for damage. So again, make sure you start out in first gear, and you know, again, if depending on your ground speed, obviously that's going to dictate how fast you run your corn head, but try to run it as slow as you can and still do a good job with your ground speed. On the right-hand side of the feeder house, again, we have the lever for our drum position. Again, it should be pointing up just like we did on the left side. Another thing we want to make sure and do is we want to make sure that we're on the small sprocket of our feeder house drive chain here. And the reason we want to be on the small sprocket, again, we want that feeder house to be at a slower speed. We're not handling a high amount of material like we would in wheat or something of that nature. So we want to be on the slow sprocket so we're not turning and burning really fast and damaging corn that way. The other thing you want to make sure is that this chain's properly tensioned so you don't have it jumping teeth and things of that nature. So, and you should want to have just a slight little gap underneath the chain. You know, it should not be bowstring tight. You want to have a little bit of slop in it, but it should be just off of the wear strip right here. And again, you adjust that tension with these two bolts right here. So again, small sprocket, drum in the up position, and you want to make sure that your feeder house drive chain is properly tensioned. Now moving back just a little bit, close that up. I've got my feed accelerator, okay? The feed accelerator is what takes the crop from the feeder house and gets it started into the rotor, okay? And a lot of damage can occur here if it's not properly set up, okay? So the first thing we want to do is we're going to open up our shield here, take the quick pin out, slide this gate, and then what we're going to do is we're going to loosen the belt. So we're going to grab this big arm right here and we're going to let this down. And what that's going to do is that's going to take the tension off of our belt. Okay, and then that's going to allow us to move it to the slow speed. Now right now it's in the high speed because I'm on the big pulley up top and the small pulley down below. So I would want to be on the outside, which is the small pulley up top and the big pulley down below. Now for food corn and popcorn, there's a feed accelerator slowdown kit. And what that's going to do is that's going to lower the speed of the low speed. About 440 RPM is your standard slow speed. You're going to drop that down to 320. Okay, and that is highly, highly, highly recommended if you're going to have any kind of quality concern with food corn or popcorn. And basically what you're going to do is you're just going to swap the pulley set out. You're just going to pull the existing pulleys off, put a new pulley set on, and you're going to be good to go. Okay. The high side, it does affect the high side a little bit. 800, 810 is about your max speed on the standard system. When you go to the slow speed, the high side runs about 770. So you're really not losing anything if you're also doing soybeans or wheat. You're really not losing any kind of speed that way. But you want to make sure that is done. it's almost a necessity that you have that slow speed kit, because you can eliminate a lot of damage on your corn. The other thing that we want to talk about is there's some wings on that feed accelerator. Now the factory standard is a serrated wing, and what we want you to do is we want you to go to the smooth ones. And again, it's not one or the other, you need to do both. You need to do the slowdown kit and you need to do the smooth wings to get the maximum quality. So we'll wrap this up, we'll go grab a wing so you can see it, and then we'll restart the video. Okay, here's the wings we're talking about. This is a smooth one, it's been taken out of a combine. And this is the smooth, there's no serrations up here. Now the ones that come factory standard have little gaps here. It looks like a serrated knife, and that's there for capacity reasons. If I have my hands or fingers together like this, it's difficult for me to grab and pull. So in a really green, viney crop, these are not going to be as effective. But if I've got my fingers open like that, I can grab and pull much easier. And that's like what the serrated ones are from the factory. But the smooth ones are going to be much gentler on your popcorn or your food corn, and are highly recommended. Again, the slowdown kit as well as these smooth bars are a necessity if you're going to get maximum quality out of an STS combine. There are 30 of these. They are balanced, so when you order a set, they're a match set. They're all within a certain spec of weight so that you don't get your feed accelerator out of balance. If you damage one from a rock or something like that, you cannot even buy just one. You have to put the full set back on, and that's the only way you can buy them anyway. So again, smooth bars, slowdown kit for the feed accelerator. That's going to allow you to get the max quality out of your combine. Okay, next thing on the combine we need to check out is we need to make sure that our concave is level. You can adjust the combine all day long, but if the concave is not level, you're chasing your tail, and it needs to be done annually. So what we've got here is we've got 3 sections of concave. We've got the front, the middle, and the back. And we've got 2 adjusting rods right here so that we can make those adjustments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my rotor in neutral. I'm going to move the lever to neutral so I can spin the rotor. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the cab, I'm going to use the button to suck the concave all the way up as far as it'll go until the adjusting motor runs out of range. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have somebody spin the rotor slowly, and I'm going to start bringing these rods up until I make slight contact with the rotor. Again, it's just spinning it by hand real slow, and I'm going to start pulling these up until I make contact in the front and back. So if I hit in the back, I'll probably just back it off just a smidge, and then I'll start pulling the front up until I make contact there, and then I want to back it off about a full turn of the nut. Okay, once I've done that front and back, and I'm about a one turn off from contact on the nut, that means that my concave is now level. It's even front to back. It's running parallel with the threshing elements on the rotor. The other thing I need to do is I've got these stops. At that point in time, when I've got it zeroed out, I want to make sure and bring these stop bolts down. Again, I've got my concave sucked all the way up. I'm going to bring these stops down and make sure that they are contacting that so that I can't tighten the concave anymore. Even though the motor's out, you might have the motor replaced at some point in time. That gets out of time. You want to make sure those stops are there so that you can't suck that concave up and get it into the contact with the rotor. But this is imperative that this is done, because if this is not level, no matter what the thing says in the cab, if this is not leveled and trued and zeroed, you're not going to really know what you're getting at, and it's going to be very difficult to adjust the combine. Alright, our rotor speed, we're going to want to run that in the low side, and that's going to have this lever pushed all the way in. Right now it's already there, but if it was out, the handle would be out here somewhere. Sometimes you kind of have to roll this a little bit and then push your handle in to get your rotor to the low side, but that's where you're going to want to have the rotor range is in the low range. And again, that's what the handle pushed all the way in. Okay, as in all corn conditions, we're going to want our chopper in the slow speed. Right now this handle is all the way out. There is a neutral in there, and that allows you to freely spin the chopper. Or if you back it up and out of the way, if you're going to windrow and wheat, there is a neutral. But for corn, whether it be food corn, popcorn, field corn, whatever it might be, we're going to want that chopper in the slow side. Reason for that is we don't want that chopper spinning really fast because those cobs can do a lot of damage. So we want to make sure that chopper is in the slow side. And the way to do that is you push that handle all the way in on the 2-speed here on an S-Series combine. So that's going to get you in the slow side. Now dropping down a little bit, close the shield here. Dropping down a little bit, I've got this handle right here. And what I'm going to do is, if right now the knives are out, which this handle is up, so that is correct. If this handle was down and those knives are in, again, if the chopper is running that way in corn, it's probably going to tear a lot of those stationary knives off. So I loosen this big wing nut, push that handle up, tighten the big wing nut back up so that my knives are pulled away so that they're not being damaged by corn cobs. Okay, now we're going to look at on the right side of the combine here at the rear by the chopper. I've got a handle here that's got a corn label and then a wheat label. This is our cob deflector. And our cob deflector just is exactly that. As that chopper spins, whether it's in slow or high, it can carry some cobs over and it will throw them back forward up into your chaffer. And what that does, those little chaffer fingers are sitting there and that cob comes up and hits it. It can beat those chaffer fingers down, it can bend them up, and basically now you don't have a chaffer anymore. You've got a hunk of bent up metal, and it's pretty much useless. So you want to make sure that this cob deflector is in this position, which it's all the way pulled around on an S-Series, but just follow the label. If you've got a 70 or 60 series combine, it's a similar setup. The handle's a little bit different, but again, you've got a label here for corn, you've got a label for wheat or beans, but you do want it in the down position. So that when that chopper is spinning this way and it throws those cobs back forward, that cob deflector hits it and knocks it down. So make sure that that is in the corn position whenever you're shelling corn of any kind. Okay, another place of damage that is often overlooked is on your elevator chains, your clean grain especially, and your tailings. One thing that we've found is these don't get adjusted as often as they need to be. And in a grain quality situation, that can definitely be a problem. So the reason for that is the proper adjustment is I should be able to slide this chain back and forth on the sprocket. In other words, it shouldn't be to where I can't move it at all, but I should not be able to pull it away. And what happens if you don't adjust these chains periodically, what will happen is that chain will get loose as it stretches. And then I've got that sprocket and I've got a chain that isn't up nice and snug on the middle. So what happens is I have the ability to get kernels of corn between my chain and my sprocket teeth. Well then as that chain comes and tightens up, it basically becomes a crusher. And it just mashes those corn kernels and cracks and breaks and mashes those delicate kernels in there. So make sure that you're keeping these good and snug. Again, I should be able to slide it back and forth on the sprocket, but I should not be able to pull it away from the sprocket. That's going to be your proper tension. This is my tailings, but much more important is my clean grain, because you think about every kernel of grain that gets in the grain tank has to go through this area. So definitely you want to make sure that you've got your clean grain properly tensioned. Again, it's a small incremental change, small incremental increase of grain quality, but again, we're talking about every little change you make, every little help you make makes a big difference over the whole of all your adjustments. Okay, another spot for a lot of damage that we find is in the fountain auger. It's probably one of the first augers to wear out because it is pushing grain at a severe angle. If these augers are getting sharp and start to wear, then it can't get the grain away as fast as it needs to. So as it starts to wear, it becomes less efficient. So I start to get a buildup. As the more buildup I get, the tighter that corn gets packed in there, the harder it is to move. So I want to make sure that these augers are in good condition. I want to make sure my cover or my shroud is in good condition. Another thing that we see a lot of is guys have bin extensions. Okay, we all know when we're in 200 plus bushel corn and we're trying to get breakthrough on a half mile, that we need those bin extensions to make that breakthrough. However, when we're harvesting food corn or popcorn, you do not want to pile the grain above this fountain auger, because as I start to pile the grain up, that starts to create back pressure and it starts becoming more of a sausage stuffer rather than an auger. And the more I do that, the tighter that grain is packed in there, the more damage I'm going to do. So again, we all know that there's going to be those situations where it's unavoidable, but for all intents and purposes, if you can avoid getting grain above the fountain auger so that you don't have that back pressure, you're going to save some grain quality. Now again, small incremental change, but again, we've talked about several of those small incremental changes, and by doing all of them, we get to make a big difference at the end. So again, this is true with any auger. A good condition auger, if you've got sharp augers, obviously it's going to be less efficient and it's going to be sharp and it's going to do more grain damage, but especially the fountain auger. Another one that you need to check is the vertical unloading auger. On your auger that swings out, the one that goes straight up and down, that one wears out quickly as well. And again, all your grain that comes out of the combine goes through that area. So make sure that that auger is in good condition on the vertical. And it's not easy to check, however, so you might want a technician to come out and do that. But definitely make sure that that vertical auger and this auger are the two most critical augers on the machine to make sure that they are in good working. Okay, one last thing we want to talk about when it comes to grain quality, and you know, it's probably not a big deal, but your rock trap. Make sure you're emptying your rock trap daily, because if you've got rocks or a steel fence post or whatever else in that rock trap, that sits right below the feed accelerator. So as that material comes in off the feeder house and goes through the feed accelerator, if you've got sharp, hard material in that rock trap, you're going to damage grain. So make sure you're emptying, and I've seen it. I've emptied rock traps and you'd be surprised what we've pulled out. But I've pulled out fence posts, pulled out obviously rocks and things of that nature. If you've got that kind of material in your rock trap, or your rock trap is just packed full of dirt and there's no way to displace that grain, displace that corn that's down in there, it's going to be a much greater impact and a much more aggressive situation. So empty your rock trap daily. Again, very small pickup in quality, but it is something that can add to your quality story. When talking about our popcorn or food corn, there's a lot of debate out there as to how to get the combine set and things of that nature, but the easiest thing to do as far as a concave setting is go out and shell an average size ear, or a good average ear that's kind of representative of the whole field as much as possible, and go ahead and shell the kernels off of it. And at that point, I need you to measure that cob in millimeters. Now, if you're like me, you probably don't have a metric tape. So what I do is I get a metric wrench, and I go to my toolbox and get a metric wrench out, and I'll see what wrench fits, kind of fits that cob. Now, I don't want to have to ram it on there or get jammy with it or anything like that. I just want a nice fit to give me a good starting point for my concave setting. So again, we talked about earlier in the video about making sure your concave is leveled and zeroed, and so that's why this is important. So I get my metric wrench, and let's say that my 30 millimeter metric wrench fits that cob about pretty nice. So that's going to give me an indication of where I want to start with my concave setting. So if I'm in food corn, a lot of them are going to be around that 25 to 30 range probably for cob size. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure and just measure that with a metric wrench, and then that's what I want my concave setting to be. Now, as far as my rotor, that's going to depend a lot on moisture and cob condition and things like that. If I've got a spongy cob, I'm going to have to probably run my rotor a little bit faster and maybe a little tighter than what I would like. But every time I speed up or tighten up, that potentially could increase the amount of damage that I'm going to see. So I would start in that 330 range, maybe up to 350 would be a good starting range. Again, that's assuming that the crop is ready to be harvested in such a way that it should be under 20%. It should be ready to be harvested. If I'm out there trying to harvest it at 25 or 30%, not only are my kernels going to be a little bit softer and more susceptible to damage, but I'm going to have to run my rotor faster and tighter to go ahead and shell that crop. So I'd probably recommend somewhere in that 330 range to be a good starting point, maybe up to 350, to get that initial set. Now you're going to obviously adjust and change from there based on your actual crop conditions, but that's a good spot to start. As far as my fan, again, in food corn, on an S series, you know, I'm gonna want to probably be up there pretty good. I'm gonna want to be in that 1100 plus range probably. For popcorn, I'm probably gonna want to be a little slower than that. You know, probably starting at 950 to 1000 range. But again, you know, I want to make sure my fan is in, you know, probably maybe towards the middle to high side of what the range in the book is, because I want to make sure I'm getting a nice clean sample in a grain quality situation. As far as my chaffer and sieve go, if you've got a later model S series, if you've got a mid-year 13 or later combine, there's a fixed rear chaffer that is manual. You adjust it with a 10mm wrench at the very back. So again, you know, the book usually states about 18 and 12 for food corn. I'm probably going to be in that 20 or so range, maybe 21 or 2. And in my sieve, you know, that 12 is probably going to be sufficient. In popcorn, probably going to need to be a little tighter than that. So I'm probably going to be in that, you know, 16 on my chaffer and probably in that 8 range, 8 to 10 range on my sieve. Now that back one, I want to tighten that back one down. I probably want it around 5mm or less. Now again, it's manual. Use a 10mm socket or 10mm wrench to adjust it. So you're gonna have to go back there and stick your head in the little inspection chute there, and then adjust that. And then again, just get a metric bolt. You know, get you a 6mm or 4mm metric bolt, and stick that in there. And then that's how you're going to measure that if you don't happen to have that metric tape. So that's kind of covering the settings, kind of where you want to start. Once you get those initial settings and you've got the field opened up, you're going to want to run through the field, and you're going to want to do a power shutdown. Now, power shutdown, first thing you need to do to get a good power shutdown is you're going to want to raise the chopper up and out of the way, put it in neutral, because you're going to want to dump that crop out on the ground so you can inspect it and see what kind of job you're doing. If you leave the chopper running, you really can't see what's going on in the machine, because once it goes through the chopper, you've lost every chance to give it a good inspection, because the chopper is going to thresh it, it's going to chop it up, it's going to damage it, it's going to do a lot of other things, and you want to get a good picture of what's going on. So you need to raise that chopper and put it in neutral, and then go ahead and run that way before you do that power shutdown. Now, to do a power shutdown, you want to be going through the field kind of at the normal operating speed, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to reach over and you're going to hit the low idle or the low throttle position, and then you're going to shut your separator and header off as quick as you can after you do that, and pull your hydro handle back. Practicing that isn't a bad idea to do, you know, ahead of time in the barn lot, just so you can kind of get good at it. But the sooner and better and faster you can do that procedure, the better picture you're going to see inside that combine. So once I've done that power shutdown, what I want to do is I want to get out of the combine. I want to go look in my corn head. Again, we talked earlier in the corn head part about what that kind of damage that auger's causing. I want to look, you know, I want to look behind the head and see what kind of losses I'm getting for header loss. And then I'm going to climb up. I'm going to look in the side of the machine. I'm going to take those black covers off. I want to look in the back of that machine and see, am I getting all the kernels off the cob, first and foremost. You know, is the pan underneath the rotor, is it loaded heavy with grain at the very back of it? You know, look in on your chaffer. You know, if I crack that chaffer open just a little bit, do I hear some grain fall through? And that might be an indication your chaffer is a little too tight. I want to look on the chaffer and sieve for unthreshed cob. I want to look for split cobs, you know, on the ground behind the machine. I want to look and see if I have cobs that are split. If I do, then I'm probably running my concave a little tight if I'm splitting them. Then I want to look for cobs that still have kernels attached. And if I still have kernels attached, then I'm either going to have to tighten my concave up a little bit or speed my rotor up just a little bit to go ahead and get those threshed. Then what I want to look at is for free grain on the ground. And that free grain, that's where I'm looking in the machine while I want to shut it down full, so I can see kind of where that grain's coming from. Do I have a lot of free grain on my chaffer in the chaff load, or is my pan underneath my rotor, is my rotor full of free grain too? So once I kind of determine that, then I can make an adjustment. If I think it's rotor loss, obviously rotor speed is probably going to be my best option to try to go ahead and get that free grain separated. If it's on the chaffer, on the cleaning shoe, I probably need to open my chaffer up a little bit, or increase my fan if I think that my chaff load isn't getting lifted up and can't let that heavier grain settle out. So again, I need to kind of make that determination. And then once I've made that, then I want to go to the tank and I want to inspect the tank for my grain quality. I want to look for cracked and brokens. I want to look for scuff seed. I want to look for a lot of different things. And again, your rotor's where most of your damage is going to come from, or your feed accelerator. So make sure it's on the slow speed. You may need to slow your rotor down a little bit if you're doing a good job on the ground, but you're getting some extra cracks or extra brokens or extra scuff seed. You may want to slow that rotor down a little bit, or maybe open my concave up just a tiny bit. But you want to make small adjustments, and you want to make adjustments one at a time, because if I go making 3 or 4 adjustments and it fixed one thing but something else got messed up, I don't even know where to start. I don't know where to start to go about trying to fix that. So again, that's some tips and hints on trying to get your combine set. There's no magic number, there's no magic bullet of where to start at. But again, your concave, the easiest thing to do is get that metric wrench out, start your rotor about 330, and go from there. So that's going to wrap up the settings portion.